Hey guys, Paul here. So I want to make a video about the upcoming August 2024 Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list. Because thanks to Konami, we actually know that it's going to be coming out this time. Yay, thanks bestie. This is a bit of a different approach though to a ban list discussion video that I wanted to take here. Because in my opinion, there's like kind of a boring, predictable part of the ban list to talk about. And then a second sort of bit to the conversation that is, I think, a little bit broader and, in my opinion, just more interesting to discuss. And that's also where I want to hear you guys' opinions. So we'll get the boring part out of the way first. Yu-Gi-Oh's national events have basically wrapped up. We've had, the US Nationals or North American Nationals, the European National, and it's pretty clear that Snake Eye is the very dominant deck. It's taken up like half the spots in the top 64 for both of them. And it's not really, a secret that this is going to be the main deck to hit, right? Some cards in some fashion are going to be hit in this deck. As for me, I personally think Snake Eyes Flamberg probably just needs to be banned. That's the card I've settled on. There's plenty of other options. Maybe they limit Snake Eye Ash. Maybe they do both. I don't know. Not a big deal, but we just know that like Snake Eye is going to get hit. It's going to probably get sort of massacred. And that makes sense. It's been around all year. It's a nuisance. Great. Okay, there are also a couple other decks and cards that sort of are in the line of fire, or at least part of the conversation. The Fiendsmith engine is new, so obviously none of the Fiendsmith cards themselves could be expected to get hit. Maybe they'll hit Beatrice or Fabled Lurie. I would like to see either of those cards get hit. I think that would make a pretty big difference. Fabled Lurie in particular might just happen because like there's that Terminal World 2 thing coming out in the OCG, so Fables will be getting more support. So something like Fabled Lurie can afford to be banned because they'll get a new card that's probably like Fable locked and blah blah blah, right? Okay, so they probably won't hit Fiendsmith too badly. Then there's like Yubel, and there's also like a couple other straggler decks too. I think Tempai probably falls into the conversation here. I wouldn't be surprised if neither of those got hit because they feel a little bit more like recent additions to the top tier of things, but I certainly wouldn't complain about like Sengen Summoning going to 1, or maybe Yubel could, like Dark Beckoning Beast could go to 1 or something, something like that, maybe Phantom Yubel. Either way, those are like the expected hits, right? This is just kind of the stuff, it's the routine. Oh, and like we get back an old card that used to be banned, like Heavy Storm comes back or something, cool. Now, that's all good and well. You can argue about what exact cards need to be hit or what don't need to be hit. Not really that big of a concern to me because I know that it like will happen. Konami will get around to it. That's normal. I think the bigger question right now for Yu-Gi-Oh is sort of asking ourselves, what concepts in Yu-Gi-Oh, like of card design, are we okay with? Because I'm starting to notice this like trend over the last few years where, outside of going from like tier 0 format to tier 0 format to tier 0 format, it just feels like decks come and go, but there are just these certain like lingering nuisances in the game. And they always sort of escape the notice of the ban list for the most part. Like sometimes they'll get hit or whatever, or they take a long time to get hit. And it seems like even with like Snake Eye gone, there's certain stuff that'll exist. So what do I mean by stuff that'll exist? Well, I want to know like what is Konami's like kind of stance going to be going forward on things like the one card starter, right? Because like you can limit Snake Eye Ash and ban Flamberg Dragon, hit OSS, whatever, just hit Snake Eye, but like still we've seen this big rise in these one card starter cards. These cards that do like all the work in a single card. They're like all the consistency, their entire engine, it's all kind of just compacted into there. And oftentimes it means that the engines get to be lean, they get to run more hand traps, and blah, blah, blah. We've talked about this. So my thing is, even if Snake Eye Ash goes, we know that like Konami is just big on these one card starters anyway. Dark Beckoning Beast is like kind of one. Samsarity Lotus is certainly one. There's like even Low, the Voiceless Voice, which I know like Voiceless isn't, like a top deck right now, or at least it's not performing like one. But I'm just talking about in the general scheme of things, one card starters, what I'd like to know is, okay, are we going to have more of these going forward? Because if we do, then it doesn't really matter that much about like any specific deck like Snake Eye getting hit, because something new will replace it, right? Like this game has been on a huge power spike in the last few years, and and like if Snake Eye gets hit, but it's just replaced with like another really big strong archetype after Rage of the Abyss comes out, then like I don't know that we really got anywhere. But that's not the only thing. There are like other latent, we'll call them issues, and like question marks that I have. A big one is, where does Yu-Gi-Oh stand on turn skips? because I feel like by turn skips, what I mean is these cards like Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity. Just these cards that, like there's a way to turbo it out and your opponents like draw phase or standby phase or something and effectively skip their turn in the sense that they're not going to be able to like activate cards or can't summon something. Yu-Gi-Oh has a huge variety of these. Albion, the Sanctifier Dragon, can summon, like the Gimmick Puppet Lock. That was the thing that we're, very used to. Or, there's other cards. Master Duel has actually been recently like dealing with this. They hit, was it Io, the Supreme Magical Force, and those sorts of things. But there's like others too. There's like Arch Nemesis Protos, technically. Where does Yu-Gi-Oh stand on turn skips? Because I think that like we need to just kind of like draw a line in the sand. Like, and by we I mean like it's Konami, not really us, but like Konami should kind of just draw a line in the sand. Like, are we okay with this game having turn skip cards, or are we not? Because I think we shouldn't be, and I think that like just banning Hot Red, Calamity, rebanning probably Arch Nemesis Protos. I've seen that card do some yucky, nasty things. And maybe even Dimension Shifter falls into that conversation. And I'm typically like a sort of Dimension Shifter defender of sorts, but like I get the gist, which is just that like we don't really want these cards to like skip opponents' turns. They generally tend to be unpopular, and I think that like really Konami should kind of just like send them all away, or maybe that's just if they want to double down and be like, well, this is just how the game is, I suppose that's fine too. I say that as if like they would tell us what their plans are, but it's Konami, they're not really going to talk about it very much. But like, turn skip cards basically is what I'm talking about. Okay, the next question is also around like, how do we feel about Omni-negates? It seems like Yu-Gi-Oh! Recently has been drawing a bit of a line in the sand with like Omni-negate cards. They banned Borreload Savage Dragon, they banned Baron de Fleur. Right now, there aren't like a lot of Omni-negate cards left, but there are these things like Apollosa and DD Wave King High Caesar, which like, they're not Omni-negates, but they're pretty close, and they can be really polarizing. Yu-Gi-Oh's been defined in recent years by like, do the long combo, make the big board, and the monsters kind of negate everything you do. So I know a big conversation piece has been like, is Apollosa, like, should it stay? Does it deserve to like be a part of modern Yu-Gi-Oh's game? Because it's a card that's not really going to get power crept, certainly not very easily, and it's going to just sort of be here to stay. As long as modern Yu-Gi-Oh allows for the warm body effect, where there's just engines that kind of just like pump out warm bodies over and over. The Fiendsmith engine, these recursive engines like Snake Eye and all that. Anything that's not like locking you into fiends or something for the turn or whatever type, yeah, Apollosa is going to be a part. And so I think it's important now to just define like, is Yu-Gi-Oh going to be a game where these cards exist, or is it not? I would like it personally if it wasn't, but I don't have a problem with it not being. It's just like I'm putting the idea out there, and I want to know like how people feel about that. And it doesn't stop there. What about Floodgates? Like, Konami seems to be cracking down on Floodgates. Over the past year, we've seen most of them get either banned or put to one, and I'm pretty glad about that. I, again, like Dimension Shifter, I think that there's like a time and place where Floodgates can be cool, but I think that they have not aged really very eloquently with the game, because as the game itself increases in speed and there's like more that you can do in a turn, I think that it subsequently feels worse to lose to Floodgates. Like, people are more and more opposed to even stuff like Summon Limit or whatever, Goes and Match, Skill Drain, all these cards, Anti-Spell Fragrance, that like it's probably best if they go. But like, if the Floodgates go, then I do think like something else probably needs to go. Like, well, if we're not going to have Floodgates, then turns do at least need to be a little bit more naturally limited in like the power scope and the power scale. So that's kind of where that like Apollosa thing part of the conversation comes back in, and like that one card starter conversation. Like, if you're going to get rid of one, then like maybe you got to get rid of another. There are still more things to talk about though. What about hand traps? This is something that like I kind of feel like the debate around hand traps ebbs and flows. It sort of depends. Different hand traps are in the limelight. Some are, some aren't. Dimension Shifter is always going to be a pretty hot button issue. It feels like I've seen some people call it the new Max C. I don't know if I'd call it that, but like, where do we stand on something like Dimension Shifter? Nibiru's been like talked about. Right now, it's not a big talking point, but like, if Apollosa doesn't exist, would Nibiru become like stronger or whatever? Like, and even some of these like new hand trap cards, like the Molcharmi cards, which obviously they're not going to be getting like banned or limited, but it's just sort of like, well, okay, how do we as a community feel about like hand traps? I think we've seen like more and more hand traps in the last few months because of that like one card combo small lean engine problem. So maybe if that's solved, then it won't feel like you need to run, 12, 15, 18 hand traps in your main deck, and maybe it's all just fine. I've mostly gotten over hand traps. I don't think that they're really all too bad. Even shifter, I can like take it or leave it, but I mean, like, I've come to terms with it. There is one in particular that I've noticed is sort of tangential to this conversation, but I'll mention it. Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood seems like it's like a weird hand trap. On paper, it's really not like very strong at all. I mean, you're just gaining life points. But I have been watching in like feature matches and stuff. It's really kind of started to affect the tournament games because there's like a timer and you can gain a lot of life points and then just kind of end up winning in time. That's like less of a game balance thing and maybe more of like a tournament structure thing. I'm not saying like it needs to get banned per se, but it's just like it's a thing to think about. I don't know. I don't have any strong opinions one way or another on Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. Like I'm okay with it, but I see where that's like becoming an issue for some players. But yeah, like just the overall hand trap thing, and then finally a few more like kind of quick rapid fire ones that I think are worth like thinking on. How do we feel about cards like Called by the Grave and Crossout Designator? Some people seem to find these cards are fine. Others are like think that they're very sacky because like stopping hand traps feels like it empowers the modern combo deck. So should they all maybe just be banned? Like should we just ban Called by the Grave, ban Crossout Designator? Like that's like sentiments I've heard. Not I to take my personal stance. I'm fine with those cards. I actually am, but I see why people wouldn't be. Also, how do we feel about maybe just like stun cards? I know some people really don't like Fossil Dyna and like Jowgen the Spiritualist, and they just feel that those cards should just go entirely. I suppose that kind of falls into the Floodgate conversation somewhat. The pot cards, that seems to be something that Konami themselves are wrestling with a little. The OCG and Master Duel seem to be pretty big on like limiting pot cards, but in the TCG we mostly have kind of left them untouched. Desires has kind of been like on and off the ban list, but that's really been the extent of it. So I don't think that like there's much to do with the pot cards. A lot of top players though do feel as though Pot of Prosperity in particular is like very overpowered and like very overbearing. So it'd be interesting to see if Konami agrees with that. I don't think that they do, but maybe they do. Um, yeah. So anyway, this was a long way of saying that I think that the ban list has all the obvious stuff will probably happen, right? Like Snake Eye will get hit and we'll like move forward from this and it'll just be a bad memory. But I'm more so interested in like what's like the direction that Konami wants to take this game, because even when Snake Eye goes, if we still have one card combos or if we still have like turn skip things and stuff like that, is Yu-Gi-Oh like really in a better place at all? Like, or do we just kind of continue spamming those sorts of things? I don't know, and I want to hear what you guys think about it. How do you feel about like each of these different axes of Yu-Gi-Oh? Because in many cases they are related. Sometimes if you get rid of one thing, you probably need to get rid of another thing to balance it. Like if you get rid of all the hand traps and all the floodgates, and like the combo decks are just left to with free reign, then is that like actually better or worse? And how do you deal with maybe the Omni-negates, and how do you deal with the all of it, right? So let me know how you guys feel about that down in the comments. And sure, why not? You can also leave your actual personal ban list predictions as well. It's coming out in August, so we'll certainly find out soon enough. I wouldn't get my hopes up for anything like game changing, but Snake Eye will at least get hit. All right, cool. I've gone on long enough. I will see you guys in the next video and in the comments. I'll be reading and responding and all that stuff. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to APS Amplifier and also catch our Pot of Greed podcast. I need to start reminding people about that because it's pretty cool. Alec and I talk about things, and we're going to have some guests on pretty soon. All right, it's going to be it. Best turn.